Hello, thank you for joining me for today's video. My name is Tracy Held. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in Melbourne in Australia. These are the cards that we're going to make today. So this is the latest in craze, which I absolutely love. It's where you're taking your blends on vellum and smudging it or blending it with isopropyl alcohol. So let's have a look at what products we're using today. I'm using the Pansy patch stamp set, and coordinating with that we're using the Pansy dies. I'm also using my In Colors blends. So I've got the Fresh Freesia polished pink and soft succulent. My ink pads that we're going to use are Pale Papaya polished pink, Blackberry Bliss and soft succulent. And I'm using the Genial Gem. So these are not part of the Pansy patch suite, but they're from the hand pen suite, but they work really well for the centers. And I've got my one small stitched rectangles die, which I'm using for the sentiment. And importantly, a piece of vellum. This is what we're going to get our design on. Then some non-Stampin' Up! Specialized equipment that we need. I have an ear syringe, which I'm going to use to squish some air around. So that I just got at Chemist Warehouse. It was about $8. But very useful. And isopropyl alcohol. Now this one I got at Bunnings, and this one's actually 100% alcohol. This is important. You want minimum 90% alcohol, because otherwise you're not going to get that same effect. If you're not in Australia and you're watching, this is the equivalent of the American rubbing alcohol. And like I said, you want that high percentage, more than 90% alcohol in the solution. And the other thing that we're going to need is a paintbrush. So I'm going to move these cards out of the way for the moment. Just while I'm doing this, I'll bring them back in later for you to see. I'm going to work on a piece of scrap white paper because I think that you'll be able to see that better. Before I move these out the way, you can see the difference here. So with this one, I used the lights of the different color blends. That one I used the darks. Obviously with the lights, you're getting a much subtler image on the paper. So whichever look you're going for, I'm going to use the darks for this one because I think it's going to show up better on camera. Like I say, this technique has been doing the rounds. The best person that I saw demonstrating it was one of our Australian demonstrators, Michelle Jatrissa. So you can go and have a look at her video if you want to. I'm just pouring a little bit of rubbing alcohol into my glass. I prefer to work with smaller amounts and add if I need to. I just find that sometimes the blends do color this, and instead of throwing it away all the time, I'm just throwing it back into the bottle. But eventually, I don't want pink alcohol, which is going to color everything else. Right, so with my piece of vellum and using the fat end of my blends, I'm going to start with just scribbling a patch. Now, there's no right or wrong, and you're never going to get this exactly the same. And then we're going to take some of the rubbing alcohol, blob it around, and take your ear syringe and blow. So you can do this with a straw if you want to. If you're doing it with a straw, just be careful when you inhale. Don't inhale the alcohol. And then we're going with the next color. And blob and squish put in a bit of the soft succulent. And I'm going to keep going like that until my whole sheet of vellum is covered. And once your full sheet of vellum is covered and you're happy with that, we can put it aside to dry. The rubbing alcohol does dry pretty quickly. You can shift it around a bit, so sort of here, if you think that that green's a bit too dark, put a bit more rubbing alcohol on and squish it, and it will become runny again and move. I'm happy with that. Let's put that aside for the moment and let's work on getting the rest of our card together. For this pansy, I actually did it fairly simply. The pieces that I've cut out, I've used that big middle piece. I've used 2 of those petals and that little bit for the inside of the flower, and then I've used the 2 leaves and the bits to overlay the leaf. So if you were doing it a bit more complicated, you could use those 2 to edge the pansy, but I didn't want to do it with this one. I was quite happy with that. Here are all my cut out bits. And what I'm going to do is, with my pansy petals and a sponge dauber, I'm just taking my polished pink and I'm just putting a bit of extra color around those petals. So if you Google pansies, they come up with a whole different variety of colors, and some have a different color around the edge of the petals, some don't. So it seems like you can do whatever you like, and there's no wrong color combination with these pansies. Now, to assemble the pansy, I'm taking my big central petal, a bit of glue on the back there, and I'm going to put one of those petals behind it, and then we'll put the second petal behind that one, and my little center bit here that I cut in Blackberry Bliss. We're going to put in the middle over there. Pansy done, and I'm going to just stick down these leaf overlays. So I've cut one of the big leaf and two of the smaller ones. I always say that if your hands aren't covered in ink and completely sticky, you're not having fun. So clearly I'm having a lot of fun here, which I am. Let's do our stamping. Stamping on the inside of the card. Now it's always a matter of whatever your personal preference is, whether you stamp your dark stamp or your lighter stamp first. For this one, I find it easier stamping the dark first. So I'm going to do that first. But if you prefer to stamp your light first, then by all means, whatever works best for you. And for my lighter bit, I'm going to stamp off and then fill it in. That was my polished pink. Next I'm going to stamp this little inside of the pansy with Blackberry Bliss. As we're going here, these stamps are getting smaller and smaller. Then this has to be the tiniest stamp that you've ever seen. See it there? That's for the inside of the pansy, and I'm going to stamp that one in pale papaya. Now make sure that you put that one away as soon as you finish stamping with it, because otherwise guaranteed that's going to get lost, and it is so tiny that you're not going to find it again. And then I'm going to stamp a stem, and here I'm using the soft succulent. And our leaves. This is the highlight bit of the leaf there. So again, I'm going to stamp dark first, and then with the fill-in stamp I'm going to stamp off and then stamp over. I've used quite a lot of the stamps in the stamp set. I love that smaller pansy that goes on the inside, just a little bit different. You do have the big pansy in that stamp set as well. Let's stick this onto my card base. That can go inside, and it's all done. Alright, that's given my vellum time to dry. I have another piece of cardstock which is the same size as my vellum. Now you'll know that usually with vellum it's a bit difficult to stick it because your glue shows through. What I found with the Stamp and Seal, it doesn't show through. That's fine here. So I'm going to just put a roll of Stampin' Seal along the edge of my vellum. And if I've cut it correctly, which I hope I have, that should be the exact same size over here. There we go. And then that can get stuck down onto the front of my card. Now you can see, if you look at the three, they all look kind of similar. Those two, I guess more so because I've used the same colors, but they're completely different. And because it's all freehand and it depends on how it blows and where you put the color, you're never going to get them exactly the same. But that's the beauty of this, is that everything comes out slightly different. I've stamped my happy birthday onto a piece of white cardstock. I've cut it out using my stitched rectangle die. What I'm going to do now is, I've got another piece exactly the same cut out in the soft succulent. I'm going to cut that soft succulent piece in half. And I'm not too fussed about it being exactly in half or even straight. That doesn't matter for what I'm doing here. And then I'm putting a bit of glue on the top of that. And I'm sticking this behind it so that I've got a thin stripe of the soft succulent peeking over the top. And I'm going to do the same on the bottom. This is just giving me that little edge of color around my sentiment. If you wanted the color on the sides, you would have cut it in half that way, but I wanted it top and bottom, so that's what it looks like on the back. That's fine. Nobody's going to see the back of that. That's all good. We're going to stick that down onto the card. Now, just making sure that I've got things the right way around, because I don't want to have some things upside down. We're sticking that. I'm going to take some dimensionals on the back of my pansy. I'm keeping the dimensionals quite close together and quite close to the center, because I want to stick my leaves underneath it once I've got the pansy positioned. That over there. Then with my big leaves going at the top of the pansy. And my two smaller ones are going at the bottom. Over here. And the final thing to finish it off, which every card needs, is some bling. I'm wondering what the green one will look like. It doesn't look like it really makes too much difference with the pink behind it. It's quite subtle. So that's our card. Go and give it a shot. It's fun, it's addictive. Once you start, you won't stop. If you like my card, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. You'll then be notified every time I put up a new video. Hope you've enjoyed this one, and we will see you next time. Bye.